So one of the things that's important about us that we talk about is the kind of work that we do, the kind of work we have done. Um, I graduated from seminary with a master's degree in biblical languages in 1987 and began work as a high school teacher. I was teaching in a parochial school, a Christian school, for 2 to 3 years, and then after that, I spent some time in the pastorate, starting first as an associate pastor working with children and youth. I like to say that I was one of the world's worst youth pastors. Um, I'm just not very well suited to it. Fortunately for me, I think as much as anything, and for the team that we had together, that the kids that we had in our youth group, the teenagers that we had, these students, many of them were kind of cerebral. They didn't need a lot of activity and motion. I mean, we did a lot of fun things. We used to play volleyball every Sunday night before we kind of sat down and talked about the scriptures or prayed together or whatever. But they were a group that was, they were interested in their academics, and that worked really well for me. The group that came up just after I left youth pastoring stayed at that church, but I went into another area of ministry. It just would not have been a good match of my gifts and skills and their needs. So I'm not the typical high activity youth pastor that you commonly think about. I wasn't that guy. But I do really well with teaching. And so the kinds of ministry that I've done when I've been in pastoral ministry, whether as a lead pastor of a little church in St. Louis or, a staff pastor at some medium-sized and one, rather large church, really focused very much of my attention on teaching. It's I would consider the dominant gift that God has given me, and thus that I need to use in service for people and for the church. And then several years later, I was about a dozen years into pastoral ministry when the opportunity to work, as I was finishing up my dissertation, the opportunity to work in higher education became open to me. From a very small ministerial training institution called Trinity Bible College to where we are now at Azusa Pacific University. Not too long before I was here, I was at St. Louis University, which is another Jesuit school in the middle of the country. Happened to be in our hometown, so that was kind of nice. But higher education, ministry, those are the things that I've given my life to overall. That's most of what I've done. I have spent a couple of years, I was a little burned out, to be quite honest with you, and needed a break. And so I always had this itch to be in my own business. My mother was in her own business. My father was in his own business. My uncle was in his own business. My brother, my sister. So kind of a long history, family history, grandparents, so forth, in their own business. And it's a niche I needed to scratch, and I did. So for a couple of years, I took a break from higher education, and I sold real estate. It turns out I was kind of good at it. And they say very often that teachers make very good salespeople in real estate, insurance, and stocks, and those kinds of things. So, anyway, it was fun. It was good for me, and it actually helped me with some of my work now, because in this gig, I work as an associate dean in the School of Theology at Azusa Pacific University. I have two main areas of responsibility. One has to do with curriculum assessment. So we say that we are going to do certain things in our programs and help students to learn X, Y, or Z. And so what I help faculty members and chairs and department leaders, program directors, what I try to help them do is to assess, and this is certainly language that nursing students are very familiar with and comfortable with. I try to help them assess whether we are doing what we say we're going to do. And if we are, great. Can we do it better? If we are not, okay, so what do we do about that so that we actually do accomplish the goals that we've set out for ourselves? So that's curriculum assessment. I try to help faculty, chairs, program directors with that. The other part of my job has to do with strategic initiatives. And so, very briefly, even schools from a university like a school of theology has to have certain goals and strategic ideas. And you've got all these competing priorities. A strategic plan, strategic thinking helps you make decisions. Yes to this, no to that. And so one of the things that I was hired to do is to help the dean and to help the rest of the faculty and the personnel here is to focus on strategy and how are we doing that, and that's where assessment and strategic planning and strategic initiatives overlaps, because if you say you have a plan, then you have to be able to have some kind of metrics that says whether you have indeed accomplished that plan. And I think that actually works really well with talking to nursing students, to be really honest with you, because just what I said about in the last talk about theologians being very comfortable in this space of not knowing, yet we have to make decisions, right? And so that strategic planning, that assessment helps us to make those decisions, helps us to set the chart, or set the course, chart that course, and move forward. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to break off and come back with a third video to talk about the academic part, my academic part of the course, and what you might expect from that. All right, we'll be back with you in just a minute.